Maya Rodriguez had always been invisible in the best possible way. At 34, she worked the night shift at Denver Logistics, checking inventory in a warehouse that smelled perpetually of cardboard and diesel fuel. Her co-workers barely noticed her as she moved between towering shelves with her clipboard, methodically cataloging parts that would never see the light of day. She preferred it that way. What they didn't know was that Maya had spent 6 years as an Army aviation mechanic, logging over 400 hours of unauthorized flight time on AH-64 Apache helicopters during maintenance tests in Arizona. She'd been discharged quietly after a bureaucratic reshuffling left her classified as non-essential personnel, despite having developed a critical rotor stabilization protocol that was buried in classified files without her name attached. The letter from Rocky Mountain Flight Academy arrived on a Tuesday, folded into a government envelope with no fanfare. Maya had applied using only her initials, M. Rodriguez, hoping the selection process would focus on test scores rather than assumptions. The acceptance letter was brief. Probationary admission approved. Report Monday 800. Her small apartment overlooked the airfield at Peterson Air Force Base. Most mornings, she drank coffee from a dented mug while watching helicopters slice through the Colorado sky, their rotors creating shadows that danced across her kitchen wall. She never closed the blinds. The night before her first day at the academy, Maya sat at her folding table with a worn flight manual and a custom flight simulator she built from salvaged military hardware. Her fingers moved across the controls with muscle memory, compensating for a rotor drift issue she'd identified years ago, a flaw that still existed in the current Apache software, but had never been officially acknowledged. Rocky Mountain Flight Academy was housed in a gleaming facility with floor-to-ceiling windows and the kind of modern equipment that made Maya's homemade simulator look like a toy. The lobby displayed photos of successful graduates, almost all of them young men in crisp uniforms with confident smiles. Maya arrived early, carrying a second-hand helmet and wearing her grandfather's faded army jacket. The rescue patch on her sleeve was barely holding on, the threads worn thin from years of washing. Her grandfather had flown combat evacuations in Vietnam and passed the patch to her with simple words, "Keep it close, you'll know when." The other cadets filtered in wearing expensive flight suits and carrying equipment that still had price tags. They were fresh-faced college graduates with engineering degrees and family connections to the aerospace industry. Maya took a seat in the back row, opened her taped-together manual, and waited. That's when she first saw Instructor Colonel James Mitchell stride into the room. Colonel Mitchell commanded attention the moment he walked through the door. Tall, silver-haired, with decorations covering his chest, he carried himself like someone who'd never been questioned. His eyes swept the room, cataloging each student with the precision of a targeting system. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice carrying the authority of 3 decades in military aviation, "welcome to an elite program. Not all of you belong here, and not all of you will finish." His gaze lingered on Maya longer than the others. She felt the weight of his assessment, taking in her worn jacket, her patched manual, the rubber band holding back her hair. When their eyes met, something cold flickered across his expression. "Flight training isn't about equality," Mitchell continued. "It's about excellence. Some people are born to fly. Others," he paused, looking directly at Maya, "are born to support those who fly." The first practical session took place in the simulator bay, where 12 state-of-the-art Apache simulators sat in perfect rows. Each cadet was assigned a station and given a basic systems check to complete. Maya slipped into her designated cockpit and immediately noticed something wrong. The rotor response settings were calibrated incorrectly, creating an artificial stability that would never exist in real flight conditions. She completed the exercise anyway, compensating mentally for the discrepancies. Her muscle memory guided her through sequences that felt as natural as breathing. When the session ended, her scores appeared on the main display. 98% accuracy, fastest completion time, 0 system alerts. Mitchell reviewed the results with visible skepticism. "Run it again," he ordered, pointing at Maya's station. "There must be a calibration error." Maya repeated the exercise. Her score improved to 99%. "Equipment malfunction," Mitchell announced to the room. "Cadet Rodriguez, report to maintenance. Your simulator will be recalibrated." But the other cadets had already seen the numbers. As Maya gathered her materials, she caught whispered conversations. "Did you see her scores? She made it look easy. Where did she learn to fly like that?" Mitchell's voice cut through the murmur. "Excellence isn't about individual performance. It's about fitting into a team. Some people will never understand that distinction." After class, Maya approached Mitchell's office. Through the half-open door, she could see him reviewing her file, the sparse document containing only her test scores and basic biographical information. "Sir," she said, knocking gently, "I wanted to discuss the simulator calibration issue." Mitchell looked up with barely concealed irritation. "There's nothing to discuss, Rodriguez. Equipment problems happen. We fix them and move on." "The calibration wasn't wrong," Maya said quietly. "The rotor response settings were just different from standard configuration. I adjusted my inputs accordingly." Mitchell's expression hardened. "Are you telling me how to read simulation data, cadet?" "No, sir. I'm just saying—" "You're saying nothing," Mitchell interrupted, standing from his desk. "Because you don't know what you're talking about. This isn't some weekend flight lesson, Rodriguez. This is military-grade training for military-grade pilots. If you can't handle the standards, there's no shame in finding another program more suited to your background." Maya met his gaze steadily. "What background would that be, sir?" The question hung in the air between them. Mitchell's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. Instead, he closed her file with deliberate finality. "Dismissed, cadet. And next time, knock before entering an officer's space." The harassment began subtly. Maya's simulator assignments were always the machines with technical issues, sticky controls, flickering displays, audio systems that cut out mid-exercise. When she mentioned these problems, the maintenance staff would check and find nothing wrong. The issues would mysteriously resolve themselves the moment another cadet used the same equipment. During group exercises, Maya was consistently paired with the weakest performers or assigned solo rotations while others worked in teams. Her locker was relocated to the far end of the equipment bay, and someone had taped a paper sign over her nameplate that read "Tourist." The other cadets took their cues from Mitchell's obvious disdain. During briefings, they would whisper just loud enough for her to hear. "Affirmative action case. Diversity hire. She won't last another week." When Maya sat down for meals, conversations would stop. When she stood up, they would resume with pointed comments about people who don't belong. Cadet Brandon Hoffman, the son of a retired Air Force general, seemed to take particular pleasure in the situation. He was everything Maya wasn't: young, privileged, connected, and utterly confident in his place at the academy. During one flight theory class, he raised his hand and asked Colonel Mitchell, "What happens when someone gets into the program through alternative channels? Do they have to meet the same standards as regular applicants?" Mitchell's smile was razor-thin. "Excellent question, Hoffman. The answer is that standards are standards. No exceptions, no accommodations. If someone can't meet them naturally, they'll be discovered and removed. The system self-corrects." Maya kept her eyes on her notebook, copying diagrams she could draw from memory. Around her, she felt the collective satisfaction of her classmates. They'd found their scapegoat, their example of what happened when the wrong people tried to enter their exclusive world. The breaking point came during a complex navigation exercise. Maya was assigned an outdated flight computer with a known GPS lag, while other cadets received the newer equipment. Despite the handicap, she completed the course in record time, using dead reckoning and visual landmarks to compensate for the faulty navigation system. When the results were posted, her name appeared at the top of the list. Again. This time, Mitchell didn't even pretend to investigate. He simply announced that Maya's scores would be marked as unverified pending equipment review and removed from the official ranking. Her perfect navigation run disappeared from the records as if it had never happened. Technical difficulties, Mitchell explained to the class. It's important that all achievements be properly validated. We can't have artificial inflation of scores due to system malfunctions. That evening, Maya found her flight suit hanging in a locker, slashed across the chest with deliberate precision. The cuts were clean, surgical, designed to render the suit unwearable while sending an unmistakable message. Pinned to the fabric was a handwritten note. Maybe now you'll get the hint. Maya stared at the ruined suit for a long moment. Around her, the locker room was empty except for the distant sound of other cadets laughing in the hallway. She carefully folded the damaged fabric and placed it in her bag. Tomorrow, she would need to find another uniform. But tonight, she had research to do. In her apartment, Maya pulled out a box she hadn't opened in 3 years. Inside were copies of every report she'd ever filed during her Army service, including the original documentation for the rotor stabilization protocol that had been buried without acknowledgement. Her real flight records were there too. Not the sanitized version in her academy file, but the detailed logs showing her actual experience and capabilities. At the bottom of the box lay her grandfather's rescue patch, carefully preserved in tissue paper. Maya held it up to the light, reading the faded inscription, "That others may live." She had tried to blend in, to succeed quietly without drawing attention. But Mitchell and his cadets had made that impossible. If they wanted to make her an example, she would give them one they'd never forget. The incident that changed everything happened during the Academy's monthly demonstration flight. High-ranking officials from the Department of Defense were visiting to evaluate the program, and Mitchell had chosen his star pupils to showcase their skills in live Apache flights over the Colorado mountains. Maya wasn't selected, of course. She was assigned to ground crew duty, checking equipment and monitoring radio communication while the real pilots performed for the brass. From the control tower, she watched as 6 helicopters lifted off in perfect formation, their rotors cutting synchronized patterns through the thin mountain air. Cadet Hoffman was piloting Apache Delta 7, the newest bird in the fleet. He'd been bragging all week about being chosen to fly solo for the demonstration, telling anyone who would listen that this flight would secure his placement in the advanced program. As the helicopters climbed toward their designated altitude of 8,500 feet, Maya noticed something troubling on the telemetry display. Delta 7's rotor efficiency readings were fluctuating, subtle variations that wouldn't trigger automatic warnings, but indicated the beginning of the stabilization issue Maya had identified years ago. At their current altitude and wind conditions, the problem was manageable. But if Hoffman continued climbing or encountered crosswinds, the situation could become dangerous quickly. Maya keyed her radio. "Control to Delta 7, recommend maintaining current altitude. Telemetry shows potential rotor instability." Mitchell's voice crackled back immediately. "Rodriguez, you are not authorized for flight communications. Maintain radio silence." "Sir, the stabilization readings." "I said maintain silence. One more word and you're off tower duty permanently." Maya watched the display as Delta 7 continued climbing. 9,000 feet, 9,500. The rotor efficiency readings dropped sharply, then recovered, then dropped again. The pattern was unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. She'd seen it dozens of times during her classified test flights in Arizona. On the radio, she could hear Hoffman's voice growing tighter. "Control, experiencing some vibration up here. Aircraft feels unstable." "Normal conditions at altitude," Mitchell responded. "Continue with demonstration pattern." But it wasn't normal. Maya could see exactly what was happening. The helicopter's flight control system was fighting itself. trying to compensate for rotor drift with adjustments that only made the problem worse. At 10,000 feet, in the crosswinds now buffeting the demonstration area, Delta 7 was flying on borrowed time. "Control, I'm getting significant vibration now," Hoffman reported, fear creeping into his voice. "Request permission to descend." Negative, Delta 7. Maintain formation and altitude. "Our guests want to see precision flying, not panic." Maya looked around the control room. The other instructors were focused on the main display, watching the formations progress. None of them recognized the danger signs he could see clearly in Delta 7's telemetry. In the observation area, military officials leaned forward against the windows, pointing appreciatively at the helicopters circling above the canyon. Delta 7 lurched suddenly to the left, braking formation. On the radio, Hoffman's voice cracked. "Mayday, mayday. Loss of lateral control. Aircraft is not responding." Chaos erupted in the control room. Instructors shouted commands while technicians scrambled to diagnose the problem. Through the observation windows, Maya could see Delta 7 spinning slowly in the distance, its rotor creating an erratic pattern against the sky. "Emergency landing procedures." Mitchell barked into his headset. "Delta 7, follow emergency protocols and descend immediately." "I can't." Hoffman screamed back. "The controls aren't responding. The aircraft is fighting me." Maya stepped toward the communications console, but Mitchell blocked her path with an outstretched arm. "Not another word, Rodriguez. This is not your concern." "He's going to crash," Maya said quietly. "He's going to follow his training and land safely," Mitchell replied, but his face had gone pale. On the display, Delta 7's altitude was dropping rapidly, not in a controlled descent, but in an uncontrolled spiral. The helicopter spun faster now, its engine whining under stress. Other aircraft in the formation scattered to avoid collision. Maya made her decision. She pushed past Mitchell and grabbed the backup radio from the emergency station. "Hoffman, this is Rodriguez. Listen to my voice and do exactly what I tell you." "Rodriguez, shut that radio off immediately." Mitchell lunged for her position, but she stepped back, keeping the microphone active. "Brandon, cut power to your right side rotor input and reset your vector thrust. Do not use main rudder. That will make the spin worse." I can't." "Yes, you can. Trust me. Cut right side power to 40% and use left trim only." Through the window, Maya could see Delta 7's spin beginning to slow. Hoffman's voice came back steadier. "It's working. The rotation is stopping." "Good. Now stabilize your pitch and hold position. Don't try to climb. Just hold steady while I talk you through the landing sequence." Mitchell reached for the radio again, but one of the senior instructors, Captain Lisa Santos, stepped between them. "Let her work," Santos said quietly. "She knows what she's doing." For the next 10 minutes, Maya guided Hoffman through the most delicate landing of his life. Her voice remained calm and precise as she walked him through each adjustment, each correction, each moment of the controlled descent. She'd never met this particular crisis in real flight, but she'd prepared for it countless times in her homemade simulator, using the exact protocol she'd developed and documented years ago. Delta 7 touched down hard but safely in an emergency landing zone 3 miles from the base. The helicopter bounced once, tilted slightly, then settled with a grinding screech of metal against rock. In the control tower, silence fell like a curtain. Maya set down the radio and turned to face the room full of instructors and officials. Every eye was on her. Mitchell's face was white with rage. "You just violated direct orders and compromised military protocol. You're finished here, Rodriguez. Pack your gear and get out." But before Maya could respond, one of the visiting officials, a woman in a sharp military uniform with stars on her collar, stepped forward. "What's your name, cadet?" the general asked. "Maya Rodriguez, ma'am." "And where did you learn that rescue procedure, Rodriguez?" Maya met the general's eyes steadily. I developed it myself, ma'am. 3 years ago, while serving as engineering support at Holston Aerospace. The protocol was buried in classified files after I was discharged. The general's expression sharpened. You wrote the stabilization override. Yes, ma'am. Mitchell stepped forward, desperation creeping into his voice. General Foster, this cadet has been problematic from day one. Insubordinate, disruptive. General Foster raised a hand, cutting him off. Colonel Mitchell, that cadet just prevented a crash that would have killed one of your students and destroyed a $12 million aircraft. Using a protocol she developed herself. I suggest you reconsider your assessment. Maya felt the room's energy shift around her. The other instructors were looking at her differently now. The visiting officials whispered among themselves. Even some of the cadets who had watched from the background seemed to be seeing her for the first time. But Mitchell's expression only hardened further. Maya realized with cold clarity that saving Hoffman's life hadn't earned her redemption. It had made her a threat that needed to be eliminated. That night, Maya sat in her apartment with every document from her army service spread across the folding table. She'd saved Hoffman's life, but she knew Mitchell would never let that victory stand. He'd find a way to spin the incident, to make her the problem rather than the solution. She needed to be ready. The next morning brought a formal disciplinary hearing. Maya was ordered to report to Mitchell's office, where she found him seated behind his desk with 2 other senior instructors flanking him like sentries. A stack of papers sat before him, presumably documenting her various infractions. Cadet Rodriguez, Mitchell began, his voice cold and formal. You stand accused of insubordination, violation of communication protocols, and unauthorized assumption of flight control authority. These charges are sufficient for immediate dismissal from the program. Maya had prepared for this moment. She pulled a folder from her bag and placed it on Mitchell's desk. Sir, I'd like to submit evidence for my defense. Mitchell glanced at the folder with disdain. There is no defense for what you did yesterday. You violated direct orders. I saved a pilot's life using a procedure I developed. Maya interrupted quietly. A procedure that's now being implemented across all Apache fleets, according to this morning's Department of Defense bulletin. She slid a printed email across the desk. It was addressed to all military flight training facilities, announcing the immediate integration of the Rodriguez stabilization protocol into standard emergency procedures. The email was signed by General Foster herself. Mitchell's face darkened as he read. This doesn't change anything. Military discipline. Actually, sir, it changes everything. Maya opened her folder and began laying out documents. This is my original Army service record, including my actual flight hours and technical contributions. This is documentation of the stabilization protocol I developed at Holston Aerospace. And this, she placed a final document on top of the stack, is a copy of the formal inquiry into my military discharge. Captain Santos leaned forward to examine the papers. Her expression shifted as she read. Rodriguez, you logged over 400 flight hours? Why isn't this in your academy file? Because my service record was classified and then buried when I was discharged during a bureaucratic reorganization. My contributions were uncredited, my flight time unrecognized. I've been flying longer than most of your instructors. Mitchell snatched the documents, scanning them quickly. Maya could see his hands trembling slightly as the implications became clear. If her real qualifications were known, her treatment at the academy would look like discrimination at best, sabotage at worst. These records could be fabricated, he said desperately. Anyone can produce official-looking paperwork. Then verify them, Maya said calmly. Call Holston Aerospace. Contact my former commanding officers. Run the authentication protocols. You'll find everything is legitimate. The room fell silent except for the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. Maya could see the calculation happening behind Mitchell's eyes, weighing his options, looking for an escape route that didn't exist. There's something else, Maya continued, pulling out her phone. Yesterday's incident was broadcast live to the Department of Defense Evaluation Committee. The entire rescue was recorded. Your refusal to let me assist, your attempts to stop me from helping, and the successful resolution using my protocol. General Foster has already requested copies of the audio. Mitchell's face went gray. You recorded. The Academy's own communication systems recorded everything. It's standard procedure during demonstration flights. Maya gathered her documents and stood. I understand you have a decision to make about my status here, but I'd recommend considering all the facts before you act. As she reached the door, Captain Santos called after her. Rodriguez, wait. Maya turned back. I'd like to review your service records more thoroughly. Would you be available for a meeting this afternoon? Yes, ma'am. After Maya left, she could hear raised voices through the office door. The conversation was brief but heated. Within an hour, word had spread through the Academy that the disciplinary hearing had been postponed pending additional review. That afternoon, Maya met with Captain Santos in a quiet conference room away from Mitchell's domain. Santos had spent the morning making phone calls to verify Maya's background, and her demeanor had completely changed. Your record is extraordinary, Santos said, laying out the verified documents. Flight performance, technical innovation, problem-solving under pressure. Why were you discharged? Budget cuts and bureaucratic reshuffling. My unit was downsized, and personnel with my classification were deemed non-essential despite our contributions. It was easier to let experienced people go than to find appropriate positions for them. Santos shook her head. The system failed you. And we've been failing you here too. She looked directly at Maya. I want to make this right, but I need to understand what you want. Do you want to continue in the program? Do you want Mitchell held accountable? Do you want institutional changes? Maya considered the question carefully. I want to fly, ma'am. I want to be judged on my abilities, not my appearance or background. And I want other people like me to have the same opportunity. Then we're going to make that happen, Santos said firmly. But I need you to trust me and let me handle this properly. Can you do that? Maya nodded. For the first time since arriving at the Academy, she felt like someone was actually listening. Over the next few days, changes began happening quickly. Maya's real service record was officially integrated into her Academy file. Her simulator scores were restored and properly credited. Most importantly, General Foster announced that she would be conducting a comprehensive review of training standards and instructor performance at Rocky Mountain Flight Academy. The other cadets' attitudes shifted noticeably. Some approached Maya with awkward apologies. Others maintained their distance but stopped the open hostility. Hoffman, still shaken from his near-crash experience, sought her out personally. I wanted to thank you, he said quietly. And to apologize. I was wrong about you. We all were. Maya accepted his gratitude gracefully, but she wasn't ready to forget how quickly they'd all been willing to dismiss her. Respect earned through crisis was better than no respect at all, but it wasn't the same as respect given freely. The real test would come when Mitchell made his next move. Maya knew he wouldn't go down without a fight. Mitchell's retaliation came in the form of a carefully orchestrated character assassination. Since he could no longer question Maya's technical abilities, he shifted to attacking her integrity. During the next morning's briefing, he announced a new policy. Due to recent security concerns, all cadets will be subject to enhanced background checks and integrity evaluations. We've discovered that some individuals may have misrepresented their qualifications or hidden disciplinary issues from their service records. The implication was clear. Mitchell was suggesting that Maya had somehow falsified her credentials or concealed negative information. It was a desperate move, but effective. Doubt spread through the cadet ranks like wildfire. The whispers started immediately. What if her records are fake? Maybe there's more to her discharge than she's telling us. Why would they bury someone's accomplishments unless there was a reason? Maya felt the fragile trust she'd built beginning to erode. Even cadets who had apologized to her began keeping their distance again. The old isolation returned, reinforced by new suspicions. But Mitchell had made a critical error. By formally questioning Maya's credentials, he triggered an official investigation that would examine not just her background, but the entire process by which she'd been dismissed from the program, readmitted, and treated during her time at the academy. General Foster arrived unannounced 3 days later, accompanied by a team of military investigators and Department of Defense auditors. They set up in a conference room and began interviewing every instructor and cadet individually. Maya was called in on the second day of interviews. She found herself facing a panel of 4 officers, including General Foster, all wearing expressions of professional neutrality. Cadet Rodriguez, General Foster began, "We're conducting a comprehensive review of training practices at this facility. We'd like you to walk us through your experience here, from admission to present day." Maya told her story methodically, sticking to facts and avoiding emotional language. She described the equipment malfunctions that seemed to follow her, the social isolation, the arbitrary reassignments, and the consistent dismissal of her achievements. She presented documentation where she had it and relied on the Academy's own records for the rest. The investigators asked probing questions about specific incidents, cross-referencing her account with those of other witnesses. Maya could tell they were building a comprehensive picture of what had been happening. "What about Colonel Mitchell specifically?" one investigator asked. "Can you describe your interactions with him?" Maya chose her words carefully. "Colonel Mitchell has made it clear from the beginning that he doesn't believe I belong in this program. His actions have been consistent with that belief. Can you be more specific?" Maya detailed the simulator incidents, the equipment problems, the disciplinary threats, and finally the near prevention of her helping during Hoffman's emergency. With each example, she could see the investigators taking notes and exchanging glances. After the interview, Maya waited. The investigation continued for another week, with officers reviewing flight records, maintenance logs, communication transcripts, and personnel files. The atmosphere at the academy became increasingly tense as everyone realized the scope of what was being examined. The breakthrough came when investigators discovered Mitchell's personal correspondence. Among his emails, they found messages to other instructors discussing the Rodriguez problem and strategies for encouraging her to withdraw from the program. One email, sent to the Academy's admission board, questioned whether diversity initiatives were compromising program standards. More damaging was Mitchell's communication with maintenance staff, requesting that Maya's equipment be given lower priority for repairs and calibration. The paper trail showed a clear pattern of deliberate sabotage disguised as routine maintenance issues. The final piece of evidence was the most explosive. A recorded conversation between Mitchell and another instructor, captured by the Academy's security system during after-hours use of a conference room. In it, Mitchell explicitly stated his intention to wash out the Rodriguez woman before she becomes a bigger problem. When confronted with this evidence, several instructors who had remained silent began coming forward with their own accounts of Mitchell's behavior. Captain Santos revealed that she'd objected to Maya's treatment multiple times, only to be told by Mitchell that some people need to be managed differently. The case against Mitchell became overwhelming, but even as his position crumbled, he made one final desperate attempt to destroy Maya's credibility. The confrontation happened in the Academy's main auditorium during what was supposed to be a routine assembly for all cadets and staff. Maya had been asked to report early for administrative purposes, and she found herself seated in the front row facing a lectern where Mitchell stood with a thick folder in his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mitchell announced as the room filled, "today we're addressing a matter of institutional integrity. It has come to my attention that serious questions have been raised about the qualifications and conduct of one of our cadets." Maya felt her stomach drop. This was Mitchell's last stand. He was going to try to publicly destroy her before the investigation could conclude. "The individual in question has presented credentials that while technically accurate, tell only part of the story. What hasn't been disclosed is the real reason for her military discharge. Mitchell opened his folder and began reading from what appeared to be an official document. Cadet Maya Rodriguez was discharged from the Army following an incident involving insubordination and failure to follow direct orders during a classified operation. Her commanding officers noted concerns about her ability to function within established military hierarchy. The room buzzed with whispers. Maya felt the eyes of every person there burning into her back. This was exactly what Mitchell had been building toward: public humiliation that would be impossible to overcome. But as Mitchell continued reading, Maya realized something was wrong with his narrative. The details he was describing didn't match her actual service record, and some of the incidents he mentioned had never happened. He was either reading from fabricated documents or deliberately misrepresenting real ones. Maya stood up. "Colonel Mitchell," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium, "are you reading from my actual service record?" Mitchell paused, clearly not expecting to be interrupted. "Sit down, Rodriguez. You'll have an opportunity to respond. Because if you are, then you're misrepresenting what it says. And if you're not, then you're presenting false information to this assembly. Sit down." Mitchell barked, his composure cracking. Maya remained standing. "Sir, my actual discharge papers cite budget constraints and unit reorganization as the reason for my separation. There is no mention of insubordination or disciplinary action. If you have different documents, I'd like to see them." The auditorium fell completely silent. Mitchell looked down at his folder, then back at Maya. For a moment, his mask of authority slipped, revealing the desperation underneath. "I have the real records," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Then share them," Maya replied calmly. "Let everyone see exactly what they say." Mitchell's hands were shaking now. He looked around the room as if searching for support, but found only curious and increasingly skeptical faces staring back at him. The other instructors were watching him with expressions ranging from confusion to concern. That's when the auditorium doors opened and General Foster walked in, flanked by her investigation team. "Colonel Mitchell," the general's voice cut through the tension like a blade, "please step away from the lectern." Mitchell's face went white. "General, You were just conducting an unauthorized proceeding using fabricated documents to defame a cadet who is under the protection of an ongoing federal investigation." Foster approached the front of the room with measured steps. "The documents you're reading from are not part of Cadet Rodriguez's official record. They appear to be created specifically for this presentation." The general reached the lectern and extended her hand. "I'll take those papers now." Mitchell hesitated for a long moment, then handed over the folder. Foster flipped through it quickly, her expression growing darker with each page. "These documents are forgeries," she announced to the room. "They contain fabricated incident reports, altered dates, and false signatures. Creating fraudulent military records is a federal crime." The auditorium erupted in whispers and gasps. Maya remained standing, watching as Mitchell's career disintegrated in real time. Furthermore, Foster continued, "Our investigation has uncovered a pattern of discriminatory behavior, abuse of authority, and deliberate sabotage of a qualified cadet's training. Colonel Mitchell, you are hereby relieved of duty pending formal charges." 2 military police officers appeared at the auditorium doors. Mitchell looked around the room one last time, his gaze settling on Maya with pure hatred. "This is because of you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya met his eyes steadily. "No, sir. This is because of you." As Mitchell was escorted from the room, General Foster turned to address the assembly. "Let me be clear about what has happened here," she said. "A highly qualified pilot and innovator was systematically harassed and undermined because she didn't fit someone's narrow idea of what a pilot should look like. This behavior is not only morally wrong, it's operationally dangerous. We nearly lost an aircraft and a pilot because qualified expertise was ignored due to prejudice." The general's gaze swept across the room. This academy will undergo comprehensive reforms to ensure this never happens again. Excellence comes in many forms, and our job is to recognize and develop it wherever we find it. She turned to Maya. Cadet Rodriguez, please remain after dismissal. We have much to discuss. As the assembly filed out in stunned silence, Maya stood alone at the front of the auditorium. The weight of vindication felt strange after months of struggle, but she wasn't celebrating yet. There was still work to be done. 3 months after Mitchell's dismissal, Rocky Mountain Flight Academy looked like a different place. Captain Santos had been promoted to Director of Training, and her first act was implementing comprehensive reforms to prevent discrimination and recognize excellence regardless of its source. Maya's story had become legend within military aviation circles. The Rodriguez Protocol was now standard training for all Apache pilots, and her technique for handling rotor instability had already prevented 2 additional crashes at other facilities. More importantly, her case had sparked a Department of Defense review of how qualified personnel were being overlooked or dismissed due to bias. The Academy's culture had shifted dramatically. New policies required blind evaluation of flight performance, with names and photos removed from scoring systems until after grades were recorded. Equipment assignment was randomized and monitored to prevent sabotage. Most significantly, instructor evaluations now included feedback from cadets, creating accountability that hadn't existed before. Maya graduated at the top of her class, earning recognition not just for her technical skills but for her leadership and composure under pressure. Her fellow cadets, many of whom had initially dismissed her, now spoke of her with genuine respect. Hoffman, whose life she'd saved, became one of her strongest advocates. But the most meaningful moment came during the graduation ceremony, when Maya's name was called for the Academy Excellence Award. As she walked to the stage, she could see her grandfather's rescue patch clearly visible on her dress uniform, no longer hidden or apologized for, but worn with pride. General Foster presented the award personally. Cadet Rodriguez, she said, loud enough for everyone to hear, represents the best of what military aviation can be when we judge people by their abilities rather than our assumptions. Her contributions to flight safety will protect pilots for generations to come. After the ceremony, Maya found herself surrounded by younger cadets from the incoming class, a more diverse group than the Academy had ever seen before. They asked about her experiences, her techniques, and her advice for succeeding in the program. Remember that you belong here, Maya told them, not because someone gave you permission, but because you earned it. Your job isn't to make others comfortable with your presence. Your job is to be so excellent that they can't ignore you. 6 months later, Maya received a call that would bring her story full circle. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar but carried the weight of authority. Captain Rodriguez, this is General Patricia Hayes, Director of Military Aviation Training. I have a proposition for you. Maya had been promoted to captain after her exemplary performance in advanced flight training, where she'd broken several Academy records and developed 2 additional safety protocols that were being implemented fleet-wide. She was currently stationed at Fort Carson, leading a team of Apache pilots in mountain rescue operations. I'm listening now, Maya replied. We're establishing a new program, the Military Aviation Excellence Initiative. It's designed to identify and develop exceptional talent that might otherwise be overlooked by traditional recruitment methods. We need someone to lead it, someone who understands both the technical requirements and the human costs of getting it wrong. Maya felt a familiar flutter of possibility. What would that involve? Complete overhaul of training standards, instructor certification, and cadet evaluation processes across all military flight academies. You'd have the authority to implement systemic changes and the budget to make them stick. Interested? The offer was everything Maya had never dared to dream of. The power to ensure that what happened to her would never happen to anyone else, but it would mean leaving active flying for administrative work, trading the cockpit for conference rooms and policy documents. Can I have some time to consider it? Of course. But Rodriguez, the position comes with a specific assignment for your first project. Rocky Mountain Flight Academy needs a new director of training. Captain Santos is being promoted to regional command. The job is yours if you want it. After hanging up, Maya sat in her apartment. A larger place now, with windows that still faced the airfield but furniture that wasn't held together with tape. On her desk sat a framed photo from graduation day, showing her class in formation with their aircraft. Next to it was a letter from a young woman named Jessica Chen, a recent Academy graduate who had written to thank Maya for making it possible for people like us to serve. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. Maya returned to Rocky Mountain Flight Academy as Director of Training on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Mitchell's dismissal. The position came with a corner office, a staff of 12, and complete authority over training curricula. Her first official act was hanging a simple sign behind her desk. Excellence has no prerequisites. Her second act was more personal. In the Academy's main lobby, where photos of distinguished graduates had always hung, Maya added a new section titled Pioneers of Aviation Excellence. The first photo was of her grandfather in his Vietnam-era flight suit, wearing the same rescue patch that now sat framed on Maya's desk. The inscription below read, Master Sergeant Carlos Rodriguez, Combat Rescue Pilot, Vietnam. That others may live. Under his photo, she added a small plaque with a simple message. The sky does not care where you come from, only how you fly. Within 6 months, applications to Rocky Mountain Flight Academy had increased by 300%, with the largest jump coming from women, minorities, and non-traditional candidates. The Academy's safety record improved dramatically as diverse perspectives and experiences contributed to better training protocols and emergency procedures. Maya's reforms were so successful that they became the template for military flight training programs worldwide. The Rodriguez standards became synonymous with excellence through inclusion, proving that the best way to find exceptional pilots was to look everywhere for them. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came during a routine training exercise, when Maya watched from the control tower as a young cadet named Maria Santos, Captain Santos' daughter, executed a perfect emergency landing using techniques that Maya had developed. The cadet's background was similar to Maya's: working-class family, state school education, no military connections. As the helicopter touched down safely, Maya's radio crackled with the cadet's voice. Control. This is Santos. Landing complete. Thank you for the guidance. Maya keyed her microphone and smiled. Outstanding work, Santos. Welcome to the sky. Years later, when aviation historians wrote about the transformation of military flight training in the early 21st century, they would point to Maya Rodriguez as the catalyst for change. But Maya herself preferred a simpler legacy: the knowledge that qualified pilots would be judged by their abilities rather than their circumstances, and that the sky would always be open to those who earned their place in it. Mitchell, for his part, was court-martialed and discharged from the military. He attempted to find work in civilian aviation, but discovered that his reputation had preceded him. His case became a cautionary tale taught in military leadership courses, an example of how prejudice and abuse of power could destroy careers and endanger lives. Maya never sought revenge against him. She didn't need to. The best revenge was the success of every pilot who came after her, every barrier broken, every assumption challenged. Mitchell had tried to ground her, but instead he had given her wings, and she had used them to lift others into the sky. In her final report as Director of Training, Maya wrote, "A pilot's worth is not determined by their background, but by their dedication to excellence and their commitment to bringing everyone home safely." When we judge people by their abilities rather than our assumptions, we don't just create better pilots, we create a better military and a better world. The rescue patch that had belonged to her grandfather now sat in a place of honor in the Academy's museum, part of an exhibit on pioneering aviators. But Maya kept a replica in her flight suit pocket, a reminder of the words that had guided her journey. Keep it close. You'll know when. She had known when. And she had flown. Maya Rodriguez's story became a case study in military academies worldwide, demonstrating that excellence comes from inclusion, not exclusion. Her protocols continue to save lives, her reforms continue to open doors, and her example continues to inspire those who refuse to be grounded by others' limitations. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't proving your enemies wrong. It's making sure their wrongs can never be repeated. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.